chapter 6, verse 53, the Bible says this. When they had crossed over, I'm going to remind you of last week. Some of you weren't here. Last week, they sailed across the Sea of Tiberias, or the Sea of Galilee. Now, I'm going to try to hold this map up for you as you're looking at the map and I'm behind it. This way is west. So they sailed from one side to the other across the narrow part of a long lake, a long sea. And it says they started out heading for Bethsaida, and they landed in Gennesaret, which is, so the 5,000 are fed here. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. See, I already went the wrong way. The 5,000 are fed here, and they sailed, and they went, I think, anyway, forget the map. They sailed across, and they ended, it's so funny. I'm going to actually read the verse to you. Let's go back. So, 45, jump back to 45. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get in the boat and go ahead of him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he himself was sending the crowd away. So they're sailing for Bethsaida. Now let's read this. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore. When they got out of the boat, immediately the people recognized him and ran about that whole country and began to carry here and there on their pallets those who were sick to the place they heard he was. Whenever he entered villages or cities or countryside, they were laying the sick in the marketplaces, imploring him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak. As many as touched it were being cured. Now remember this. He wasn't sailing, and that's not what he told them, the disciples. He sent the disciples off in front of all of them to go to Bethsaida. They landed in Gennesaret, which is quite a journey on the other side of the lake, northwest, both on the shore, but one way up here, one way down here. And immediately, they all started scampering and running about to get sick people and bring them to him. He came unexpected, and their belief and their faith was activated. They said, oh, he's here, boom. He was going to Bethsaida. Now, if you were to find Bethsaida mentioned in the New Testament, you'll find it says this about Bethsaida. It's the city of unbelief. What it says in the story of the city of Bethsaida is he could do very few miracles there. The one he did was a blind man that he prayed for, and the blind man didn't get healed. The only story in the Bible where Jesus prayed for someone and they did not get healed. He says, I see men like trees. I can see a little. So he took him by the hand and walked him out of the city of Bethsaida, put mud in his eye, and healed him. So he did eventually get healed. But even Jesus didn't heal him in the city of unbelief. And they were headed for Bethsaida. But they went to Gennesaret. And in Gennesaret, everyone got healed. In Bethsaida, nobody got healed. He went to both places eventually. One's a city of unbelief. And one, it didn't say they believed. It said they acted in belief. They went and grabbed people. Let me tell you what they did. They ran about the whole country. They carried people on pallets, which like a stretcher. They carried people on stretchers. They begged him, and they touched him. That's what they did to act out their belief. So here's the story. He sends them away to Bethsaida. He goes up on a hill, looks down, sees them struggling against the wind between 3 to 6 a.m. The storm just stopping them from getting where they're going, so it must have blown them north. He walks across the sea, intending to pass them by. And they see him, and they get scared to death. He gets in the boat. Well, Peter calls Peter out. Peter walks, sinks, boom. What are you doing with unbelief? They've just seen the 5,000 fed, and he's chastising them for their unbelief. It says they're grumbling, and their hearts are hardened about the feeding of the 5,000. They're a little mad, I think, that they had to work so hard. And then here they are stuck in a sea, rowing against the wind all night long. So their hearts are hardened. They finally get to shore, and immediately he starts healing people. And the people start scrambling in their belief, acting in their belief, pursuing their belief, looking for the things they want. If you had to carry your brother, and there's no motorized vehicles, and carts are only owned by people with money, and you have to carry your brother everywhere you go. Hey, little sister, you're going to have to help me carry our big brother. We got to get him downtown so we can get enough food for him to eat. We got to take him everywhere he goes. And you hear there's a guy coming that can heal him. One more carry and you can be done. One more push in effort and you can get your brother healed. Then you don't have to carry him no more. One story, a guy on a pallet, they couldn't get so they went around the hill, they got up on top of the house, put the guy on top of the house, dug a hole in the roof and lowered him, acting on their belief. At Peter's mother-in-law's house, his wife's mother's house. If I had dug a hole in my mother-in-law's house, I think that even more of the cousins would have hated me. They might have resisted the marriage. See what I'm saying? They go and they put effort because they're desperate. Sometimes I wonder, we call ourselves poor. We have people that say we're poor. We have people that say they work a lot. But when you have to work all day to feed yourself and to take care of your family, but then you got to work constantly to move your brother around on a stretcher, on a pallet, and then you hear Jesus is coming, you just might be desperate. You might be a little more desperate than you would have been if you lived in the 21st century, where you make a phone call and they come all the way in with a stretcher and you just follow the stretcher out. To go to a hospital with free food, and probably not free food, but with food, they're taken care of. I wonder how desperate we are, or do we just trust in the medical community? Heidi Baker used to see an awful lot of miracles in her ministry. They have reports and testimonies of many, many, many dead being raised from the dead. Many, many, many blind being healed. Many of these same kinds of things where people are so poor they have to be carried around. The poorest of the poor on the planet getting healed. And she made a statement that was quite shocking. Now I forgot the name of the big city, Maputo, close to where they are in Mozambique. Is that correct? Maputo? Yeah. They couldn't do miracles close to Maputo because the people of Maputo had learned to trust in the hospital. But out in the bush they call it, there's no hospitals, there's no doctors. So Jesus is coming, they have to trust in him. And when they would show the Jesus film, they would see many miracles because they were desperate. They would bring the dead person, they'd carry the corpse to where Heidi's ministry was. They would implore her like they did. They would come desperate. Our Father has died. Without him, we will all starve to death. We don't know what to do. That lady says Jesus will heal. Hey, grab the corpse, let's go. And they will work themselves half silly. If we had big Bible bookstores anymore, but we do have Amazon. There's probably 10 books to 1. 10 to 1 telling you to stop doing what you're doing. Stop working. Stop putting effort into your faith. To stop giving. You don't have to. To stop working for the Lord. You don't have to. To stop being desperate. You don't have to. 10 to 1. And someone recently tried to, get me to read a book and to converse about the subject of a book. And I said, I really try to avoid those books. Even if they're a little right, they got good points, they're always trying to convince me to slow down. And the closer I get to the end, I'm 68, so I'm not at the end. I might not even be near it, but I can see it from here. Whereas when I was young, I thought I was immortal. There's no end. You know that I'm going to be 44 when the 2000 turns, and I'm never going to be 44. That's like, whoa, Well, 44 came and passed. 2000 came and went. We're a quarter of a century past it already. A couple weeks from now. You following what I'm saying? Just keep going. Closer and closer to the end. And they want me to stop. When the Bible says no one gets the prize who stops before the finish line. These people got up and started running, scurrying about, activating their faith, acting upon their belief that Jesus is here. We got one shot at this. I think half the problem is you can get prayed for in an altar every week. So it's like, an altar again? Oh, well, I'm here to tell you Jesus is here. But what's the difference between Bethsaida and this place? In Bethsaida, they didn't bring anybody to him. A blind guy had to find him by himself. In Gennesaret, they start running all over the place, gathering their ill. You got to imagine a village in Israel in 30 BC. All the sick people are the hugest burden you have. The leper colony is your responsibility. You like it or don't like it. If you don't feed them, they're coming out of the leper caves to your home to get food because they're eventually going to come to your house to steal your food. Starving people will do all kinds of things. So you've got to take food to the leper colony. So you got to feed your family. You got to make sure your kids eat. Then you got all these sick people. You don't want them in your house. You don't want the leper near you. It's a skin-eating disease. Plus, it makes you unclean, ceremonially unclean for the priesthood. They will criticize you. So taking care of them is part of your daily burden. And Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. Well, I got news for you, Father's house. Jesus is here. If you haven't felt his presence yet, I got to tell you, he wants you to. He's available. His presence is here. You know how I know? I know it besides feeling it. I know it even if I didn't feel it. You know why? He said it. Where two or more of you gather in my name, there will I be in the midst of you. I've never found him to lie. In my life, he's never led me astray. He says it. That settles it for me. He's here. But besides that, earlier with David, he said, I will inhabit forever, always, the praises of my people. Where my people worship and praise, there will I be. My presence. And so I worship him, and there is, all by myself, there's a really nice, wonderful revelation of his surrounding presence, his thorough in-through-me presence. I can feel him in and through me anytime I want within seconds. I'll just stop and concentrate. But there's this magic about the congregation. It's so much better that most of us who know it, we get out of our chairs and we run to it. We stand to it. We raise our hands to it. We close our eyes. Sometimes we fall on our knees. We dive into it. It's church time. My brothers and sisters are going to come and help me enter a greater presence of the Holy Spirit. Together we will go before the Lord in a way that is even more than what we can get on our own. And I'm hungry for it, and I'm thirsty for it, and I long for it. Blessed is he who hungers and thirsts for the righteousness of the Lord. I hunger and I thirst, and they hunger and they thirst, and we come together, and there's an increase. And you know why I know that? Even if I didn't experience it, I'd know it, because he said it, and that settles it. Done deal. I can with absolute confidence tell you he's here. He's here. I don't like those books because they try to get me to do less. Here's what they always try to do. They try to get me to put my family first, to put my own life first. They're always trying to make me do one of those things, and I'm like, but the Lord's a covering. And if I put my family first, they're uncovered. Wouldn't that be evil? Wouldn't that be evil? To put my family above the Lord and expose them to the arrows and the darts of the enemy? To put them out from under my faith in him, which is a shield, against those darts? Wouldn't that be almost like bad dad? Bad leader? Bad father? I mean, wouldn't it? Doesn't it make sense? But if I'll put them under him, his calling first, his ministry first, his purposes first, and they're under that, I mean, they're bulletproof. They're earthquake proof. Remember last week when I told you about this is where your faith starts, this is where your life ends, and how eternity just goes on forever, and how much risk we have in eternity for the decisions we make in this puny little time frame. Put my family first for this little time frame and destroy their chances for this time frame. Put myself first. That's going to leave a red mark. That's going to be an ouch. A woe is me. Because everything Jesus teaches is against that. Everything is against that. Every ounce of my being wants to put me first. Wants everybody to acknowledge me and figure out what I've done for them and appreciate it, please. Oh, that's a lot of risk for such a small reward. And honestly, it feels big in this room, but when you look at eternity, that's a pretty tiny, tiny little reward for what he's giving me for putting myself last. Put yourself last, and I will give you all of this. Does that make sense to you? Jesus is coming. He's in the boat. Have you heard of him? I've heard of him. Did you know all of this burden of the lepers and all this burden of the lame people and the blind people that are constantly needing, you got to stop and lead them where they're going? We can get all of that taken out of our lives, not to mention the blessing it is to them to be healed, not to mention the wonder of it, not to mention the idea that God is among us, that God has visited us and found favor with us to heal. And they ran to and fro. And they grabbed him and they brought him to him. And he was so busy, he couldn't touch them all. They had to touch him. And so they did touch him. And it says, everyone that touched him was healed. I haven't seen that in my life. I haven't seen that in my life. So I was, got to make this a short one, but I was in this congregation. I got a little mad because the guy was telling a story about selling all that he had, going to southern Sudan, and had 78,000 people who came to the altar when he preached. Over a 1-2 month period, he had 77,000 people come to the altar to give their hearts, and then stay and say, tell us what to do. Overnight, 2 months, he had a congregation of 77,000 people and no help. And he was there and started getting help to come from this church in Washington, I believe. And he was from that church and started to get the help to come in little tiny bits. So he got up in this big, it was a conference in Toronto. I was sitting, the musicians pit was over here looking, well, it was over here actually, looking this way at the congregation. And I was getting a little mad. Why does this happen for him? Why is this story so rare? Why aren't you backing all of our plays? What are you doing? How come we don't hear this more often? Someone sell all that they have and go to Sudan and preach the gospel? And the Lord chastised me. Look at this crowd. Look at this crowd. So I scanned the whole crowd. He said, in this one crowd, in this one city, in this whole world, there are many cities and many crowds of believers. There are crowds 10 times the size of this crowd. But in this one crowd, there's enough money in savings accounts and all kinds of building funds in their churches and all kinds of warehoused money to send a man just like him to every single country in the world to every single people group in the world. And you're blaming me for not providing the resources to do it. You won't believe in me. And you're blaming me that you won't believe in me. Crazy, huh? I sat back down and I was like Job. I spoke and now I'll shut up. Because you're right. So that we can take security for our tomorrows with our own money and our own resources. I got me covered. Now, Lord, why aren't you taking care of them? He said, this is your heart to take care of yourself. And that's why the people in southern Sudan finally got their champion. Because one man said, no, I'm getting rid of it all. I'm giving it all up to go preach to the southern Sudanese. Humbled, I went home. Humbled, I redoubled my efforts not to be that man that has warehouses full of stuff, but put it in play because I want the people of Oroville to hear the gospel. Some of it's why we have Lights of Hope and mud runs, so they can see the results of us saying, can't reach you in the same way the southern Sudanese get reached, but we can at least show you that the Church of Jesus Christ is here to serve you. Are you following me? All right, one more, and this one's got to even be quicker. Farmland in the Midwest. Richest farmland on the planet. Amazing and phenomenal produce. The man says, I want to own a farm in that region. And he sent realtors out to buy one for him. They came back saying, there is no way anybody's selling a farm in that region. These are generational farms. No one, they're produced. But they did tell me of a piece of ground that's just where everybody's always dumped their stumps and rocks. They said it's always been for sale. He said, buy it. He went and bought it, and he began to dig and burn and pull. And he worked his fingers to the bone, labor until he finally cleared enough ground to plant. And he planted a harvest and started to produce a crop. And it was the most fertile acreage in the whole region because it had never been planted before. He continued to dig and burn and pull and finally made enough money to start building a house and building barns and outbuildings and fences and infrastructure until his farm became the most beautiful farm in the entire region known for beautiful farms. They actually put a sign on the highway, turn off here to see the Johnson farm. And people began to turn off the highway to see this marvelous farm that he had built. And he was working on the fence line when a lady pulled over and rolled down her window and said, Sir, do you know who owns this magnificent, beautiful farm? He said, I do. She said, well, the Lord has blessed you with such a glorious farm. He said, ma'am, you should have seen it when he had it to himself. People would kind of go, oh, you're a little shocked at that story. You should have seen your life when he was the only one that wanted your life to be beautiful and fruitful. But you wouldn't. He always wanted this land to produce for his people, but nobody would dig and burn and pull and tug and labor. They'd rather read the book that says you don't need to. So nothing gets produced until someone comes along who's willing. Aimee Semple McPherson was the founder of Foursquare. She was one of those people who was a lady preaching at a time when lady preachers were hated. They were, what's that called? War protests of Vietnam, protested against. She had pickets and women shouldn't be preaching and all that stuff. You know, it's of the devil, all that stuff. She was miraculous. She would wave her hand and whole crowds would fall down. Wanted to see miracles during her time, he went where she went. She saw miracles constantly. And a young woman named Karen Heinbuch decided to pull one of her sermons out of the archives, and she memorized it. And then she acted it out. She went and bought a wig that looks like Aimee's, and she had a robe made like Aimee's, and she began to act out Aimee's sermon. She even got to do it for her son, Rolf, before he passed. And he was quite impressed that she would stutter where Aimee would stutter. She just studied this sermon. And so I got to see Karen perform Aimee's sermon in a green room at a camp one night. I would say nothing on earth has produced had more effect on the Father's house than this sermon. And what it was she said, I'm do it really poorly, but here's the gist of what she said. Well, Sister so-and-so came to me and said she wanted to do a truck garden. We're trying to feed the hungry out the back door of the church, and she said this garden would help produce so much food for us to feed the poor in Los Angeles. But I can't get anybody to help me, and I don't know what to do. And Aimee said, and I began to think about brother so-and-so who's got this amazing farming background and this amazing ability. That man could touch anything and grow it. He's got a green thumb. He could produce. Why, we could have such an awesome truck garden if this man would just join us in this ministry and give his life into it. But we won't have that garden because he won't. I began to think about our kids' ministry and how much we could reach the poor kids of Los Angeles, Echo Park, how we could preach the Foursquare gospel and reach all these kids and get them young and get them serving Jesus as children, because we have such amazing people in our church that we could have the most amazing ministry to children of any church that's ever been in Los Angeles. But we won't, because they won't. I began to think about all the other things we could do. Why, we could build a university and we could educate young people for $150 a year. And we have so many rich people in our church that we could educate these teenagers and young adults, and we could send them out to the four corners of the world and preach the gospel in every nation. For $150 a year, for 4 years, we could completely educate a kid and send them out to preach the gospel. But we won't, because they won't. Well, Karen had me on my knees by the time she was done. When she was done, my life was changed. My life was completely changed at a camp in Sonora called Old Oak Ranch. I was not only the youth pastor, I was one of the main staff members running the camp. And I said, I will never be that man again. Can you handle another story? Anthony Campolo had his 15 minutes of fame where he was the spice of life for the month, man. Every city he preached in, he filled the arenas. He came to Sacramento. I had a youth group. I had a same youth group I took to Karen's camp, the camp with Karen. He gets up, starts, I'm going to preach on Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats. I was hungry and you fed me not. And while I'm preaching this message, 25,000 children, just in the minutes that I'm preaching to you, 25,000 children will die in the world of starvation. He paused. He said, I told you I'm going to preach on the sheep and goats, but I also told you that 25,000 children are going to die while I'm preaching, and you people just don't give a blank. And he didn't say blank. He said one of the main cuss words of our time. The whole place went, Christian church, 17,000 people, way more than that because they had the floor covered too. 17,000 was what Arco held in those days. So the Arco Arena, the first Arco Arena. The floor was covered in chairs, so it had to be 20,000 people. Gasping while he pauses. I was so angry, I just brought my youth group to this guy cussing from the stage. All I heard was the cuss word. I wanted to fight. I was so mad. How dare you? He said, I just told you that while I'm speaking, 25,000 children are going to die. And all you care about is I said the word blank. I felt like I'd been stabbed in the gut. I went down on my knees on the concrete in Arco Arena and began to cry. He was right. He was dead right. All I cared about was he said that word. I didn't hear him say 25,000 children will die while he's speaking. I only heard that word. I only responded. Another time, Anthony Campolo changed my life. I will never be that man again. I will never be that man again. I will be different from this moment on. Aimee changed me 25 years after her death by Karen sharing that message. Anthony changed me. The story of the farm totally changed me. Yeah, when he was the only one that wanted me to flourish, he's the only one that wanted me to be this most beautiful producing person. These things changed me. Messages that changed my life. I will never be that again. These people heard Jesus is coming and they jumped up and they acted upon it. Today, I'm going to pray for healing. Physical healing. That's what I'm going to invite you to come for. We are going to have women on this side, men on this side. That's not going to change while I'm the pastor here. Our staff are going to lead you and guide you into this. I've had so many testimonies of healing lately from people coming to this altar to get so many testimonies of God meeting them and touching them and doing what they came to receive. Sometimes I tell you, get prayed for what you need. I don't need to know what it is. He knows, you know. And then tell me later what happened. And you tell me, God did mighty and wonderful things in you. But guess what? He didn't do, I never get a testimony of anybody that turns and walks out the door. I never get the testimonies from people who sit in their chair and do nothing. I only get the testimonies from those that get out of their chair, spend the time it takes to wait their turn and wait on the Lord and let Him touch you. That's where I get the testimonies. I've had wonderful and marvelous testimonies lately of people being healed. I've had wonderful and marvelous ministries presented to me. I've had God tell me what He wants to do. I prayed and asked Him. Isabel said I had a blank check, so I wrote blank checks, 2 of them, for others, not for me. And I want them desperately. But I always come back to Aimee saying, but we won't have them because you won't do them. I say, well, I'm going to keep trying. I still got time. I might see the end, but it's not here yet. I'm going to keep trying to tell them. If we'll do we could have the greatest, we could have the best, but we will only have it if we say yes, and we do it. We're only going to get healed if we seek it. We're only going to know His presence if we go after it. We're only going to really fall in love with Him if we decide to. The bird of paradise is not going to poop on your head and make you love Jesus. You're going to have to decide to. And I said that to wake some of you up because you were falling asleep on me. Did he say poop? Martha, what did he say? Wake up. You're only going to get what you need to get if you go after it. Today, we're going to pray for healing. It's going to be fast. It's going to anoint you, pray for you. Boom. He's here. The King is here. He's here because He said He's here. He's here because I happen to know that more than 2 of us gathered in His name. He's here because I heard worship. They're going to lead us in worship. There's going to be more worship. He's here because He said He'd be here. I can feel Him. During this prayer, I will see Him. I will have visions of Him. I will know of Him. He will impart through me. There will be miracles. There will be goodness. There will be grace because we will. Because we say yes. Are you ready? The people of Gennesaret ran to prove their readiness. Let me read to you what they did again. They ran about the whole country. They didn't run about the room. They ran about the country, carrying people on pallets, on stretchers. They implored of Him. Come up here imploring for what you need. And then they touched Him. When I touch you, don't let it just be me touching you. Touch Him. Touch Him. And as many as touched Him were healed, it said. Are you ready?
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe so that you never miss another video or live stream, and if you'd like to support the Father's House, just click the Give button. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you soon.